In this video, we're going to be reviewing the Smith & Wesson Model 442-1 J-frame airweight revolver. As summer is quickly approaching at the time of the making of this filming, a lot of people are wearing lighter clothing and they tend to find it a little bit harder to conceal their handguns when they carry them, so they tend to look for better options. And one of those options that's very popular for people is to carry a very lightweight revolver like the Smith & Wesson Model 442. Now, the origins of the Smith & Wesson, this model in particular, goes back as part of the Centennial line of revolvers that was first introduced back in 1952. The current version of the 442 was introduced in the early 1990s and has been going strong ever since then. Now, as far as caliber and capacity concerned, these are 38 Special plus Ps, which means you can run both 38 Special as well as the plus P loads. It is also a 5-round revolver. Now, all these guns here have been safety checked prior to the video going on, but basically it's a 5-shot revolver, and you contrast that, for example, with another very popular concealed carry option, which is the P365, which standard carry is 10 rounds, so it's half the round count. Now, this is a revolver, and it is a double action only revolver, which means the focus of this is in defense. That is why you don't, for example, see an exposed hammer. An exposed hammer, like you see here on the 60-14, which we have a link to that we reviewed before, allows you to shoot both double action as well as single action. However, in a purely defensive posture, in many cases, you're going to be firing in a situation where you don't really have time to cock the trigger. In most cases, you're going to be firing it very quickly and pulling it in and out very quickly, which allows you to be relatively snag-free when you're pulling it in and out of a pocket, and the ability to fire it. Now, as far as the trigger on here, one of the things about if you've never owned a double action only revolver is it is, again, double action only, but one of the things you'll kind of get the hang of when you start firing these is figuring out where the various breaks are, or positions, if you will, within the firing sequence. So, for example, if you did want to shoot more accurate shots, how to get to a point where you can get the most accurate hold and shots out of the handgun. Again, it just takes a little bit of practice when you have the handgun, but again, it's a very effective option and can be just as accurate as a double single action if you're really good at pulling the trigger and understanding how to do a proper trigger pull. Now, the trigger pull on the pistol comes in, I clocked it at around 10.5 pounds on my Lyman gauge. One of the things that will improve this over time with many people who have had these handguns is they've said that it basically takes, if they do about 500 to 1,000 rounds of dry firing, it tends to lighten up or smooth out the trigger a little bit as well. One of the recommendations I would have if you're doing that is to buy some snap caps as well, so you do less damage on the gun potentially while you're dry firing it, to try to break in your action. Now, as far as ergonomics and weights are concerned, the 442, and this is one of the reasons why people really love this, is a very lightweight revolver. So in this case, for example, you can see here the current weight is 14.5 ounces. So basically, fully loaded with 5 rounds, it comes in around 1 pound, 1 ounce. So basically, it's about a 1 pound handgun fully loaded. Now, you compare that, for example, with the Smith Model 60 is a all steel handgun, and this comes in at 1 pound, 6 ounces. So it's about 7.5 ounces more than the 442. But when you're carrying concealed, especially when you're carrying it lightweight concealed, every ounce makes a big difference. Then you can also contrast this with the SIG P365, which comes in at 1 pound, 2.5 ounces with an empty magazine. The other thing about this is it's very easy to pocket conceal. It's not boxy, for example, like a semi-automatic. So when you look at a semi-auto like a 365, you can see they're very boxy profile. Now, in this case, for example, if you're going to concealed carry this, you can see it kind of slims down both ways, right? And we'll talk about this in a moment. But in many respects, it's very easy to conceal a revolver as opposed to a semi-automatic handgun because of the fact of the profile of how it's laid out. It also has a stock grip in here with a 2-finger grab. So basically your pinky lies free. This again is one of the compromises you have with size and controllability. So in this case, for example, my pinky is basically not really doing anything on this type of grip. And there are other types of grip options as well. But again, this is a great compromise, good grip for what they do. The final thing is this is an all matte black finish in the 442 model. That means it's got a stainless barrel, carbon cylinder, alloy frame, all black and to match, which again is something that I really like on a concealed carry handgun. So it keeps the profile a lot lower, as well as the color, any potential glare, a lot down. Accuracy is concerned, the first thing I wanted to talk about is what types of accuracy can you expect to get out of the 442. So in this case, for example, I did some very short range shooting because that's really what this handgun is applied for on the bench. So standard loads. This is the type of group I was able to get out of it. And then I used a different set of plus P loads, a little bit more stout at 30 feet. And then it opened up a little bit, but again, very respectable groups. But again, most of the firing that you would be doing potentially in a defensive situation would be within that 15 foot or less. And as you can see, the accuracy is very good. Now, when you look at the sights, for example, on the 442, they have fixed sights both on the front and the back, and you can't change these out. So for example, on the 60-14, there's a pin here that allows you to change out the front sight, so I put a high visibility front sight. In the case with the 442, you don't have that option. But again, all you're really trying to do with a handgun is to focus on the front sight anyway. So one of the things I recommend, as I have done in previous videos, is stop by a hardware store when you get one of these and get some Rust-Oleum appliance touch-up paint. So you can do these in either white or like a bright red. I find on black pistols the white tends to stand out a little bit better, but what you'll notice is that I just painted the blade with this touch-up paint. And again, it's very strong touch-up paint, it's very rigid. And it allows me to easily focus in on the front sight when I'm firing the pistol. So again, it's a great option, but that's one of the things I would recommend that you do with your 442 when you buy it. Now, the other thing about accuracy is your point of impact is going to change based upon the ammunition, the types of ammunitions that you fire out of here. Some will fire higher, some will fire lower. So one of the things you're going to need to do with a handgun like this is become familiar with the ammunition that you're firing, because since you have a fixed sight, you're going to have to adjust relative to the holds that you're going to need to do based upon the ammunition that you're firing. Now, as far as accuracy is concerned, it's important to point out one final thing, which is this is a designed to be a really close-in defensive handgun. The average gunfight typically involves what are called the rule of threes. That's 3 seconds, 3 shots at 3 yards or less. And basically what that means is most situations, not all, but most situations where you're going to potentially get into a defensive handgun situation is you're going to have a very quick situation happening, right, where you need to draw quick, fire off 3 shots at 3 yards or less, right, within 3 seconds. In other words, you're probably not going to need 5 or more rounds in a typical defensive situation, because it's going to be kind of a fire and flee type situation. So that's one of the reasons why, even though this has a lower round count than many of your semi-automatics, in this case you might not need it, because you're firing at very close range, you're getting your shots off and getting the hell out of there, right? That's the rule of threes. So the other thing about this is, as far as accuracy, there's also just the simple rule of physics. This is a lighter gun, which means you're going to feel more felt recoil with this. The lighter the gun, more felt recoil. That means it's harder to control them accuracy wise as well, which is why we'll get into some of the ammunition options for this pistol that I would recommend. So what are some of the things that I like about this? First off, it's high quality, right? It's a Smith & Wesson. They tend to hold their value. These are great guns. I also like it's blackened to match on the barrel, the frame, the cylinder, etc. It's very lightweight and compact. Again, 14.5 ounces. This is just less than a pound, or around a pound fully loaded. Now, the other thing I really like about revolvers in particular, especially a revolver like this, is the versatility of the caliber. Now, you might look at this and say, well, it's a 38 Special plus P, but there's all different types of ammunition that you can run through a revolver that you really can't run through a semi-auto. When you run a semi-auto, they're kind of rated to be able to run and cycle based upon certain powers of certain loads. But in the case with the revolver, you can fire damn near anything out of these. Everything from wad cutters to hollow points to full metal jackets to hard cast bullets, even birdshot, right? Because they're always going to cycle, because when you have them in the cylinder is just turning to your next shot. And that brings us to what you should be carrying as far as a load in a handgun like this. Many people that buy a handgun like this fall in love with the weight of it. And they're like, wow, this feels really good in my hand, whatever. And then they fire it. And they start firing some powerful loads out of it. And they're like, whoa, wait a second. I'm not as accurate with this, or this doesn't feel comfortable. That's why it's very important when you buy a handgun like this to find the right type of ammunition to carry in the handgun. Now, the reality is the majority of people that buy a handgun like this cannot handle and accurately and comfortably fire 38 Special Plus Ps. Even though it is rated for that, it's so light, most people just simply can't manage it. Some people might power down a little bit to a standard 38 Special load. And to some people that might be even too much as well. For women, older people, etc., or if you're just highly recoil sensitive, again, that might be too much of a load for you to comfortably fire out of the handgun. Which takes me to the loads that I typically recommend people carry out of a handgun like this. Now, there are what are called low recoil loads, or light loads, that have been designed specifically for handguns like this, so that people who are recoil sensitive can effectively fire out of them. Hornady Critical Defense makes a light load, for example. MagTech makes a special short, the 38 Special short round that is effectively a light load. But one of the best options on the market, ironically, is using a bullet technology that a lot of target shooters will use, which is called a wad cutter. So in this case, for example, when you look at a 38 Special, and you contrast this, for example, with a 9mm. In this case, it's almost an identical bullet. But in this case, the case is much longer, right? This is a lower pressure load as opposed to a higher pressure load like a 9mm, which means you've got a lot of empty casing space. So what the wad cutters do is they essentially take a bullet that normally you're going to see, for example, is a hollow point or a full metal jacket, and they seat it all the way within the case. So in other words, when you look at the case, it almost looks like an empty case, a wad cutter, and at the very top of it is a flat top of the bullet that is seated within the case, because again, you got plenty of room in the case to be able to seat the bullet. And that's what wad cutters are. They're basically flat fronted bullets that you can fire out of these cartridges. Now, the beauty with wad cutters is the reason why target shooters love shooting them is because since they have a flat front projectile, they tend to make very clean round holes on the targets. But what they also do is they actually, for guns like this, in very short defensive situations, actually provide really good ballistic capabilities as well, because basically what you're doing is you're firing a 148 grain flat front projectile that, unlike, for example, a full metal jacketed round, which might deflect off of certain things, tends to barrel through and do as much damage as possible. That's why a lot of people carry semi-wad cutters and wad cutters, is because they're very effective ammunition, even though they might look funny, because when you look at the case, you're going to be like, where's the bullet, right? Because it's seated within the case. The other thing to consider about the wad cutters are, the wad cutters are typically loaded at lower velocities, typically of around 700 feet per second. And basically what that does is it allows you to have very light recoil on a handgun like this. In fact, many people have said when they fire wad cutters, it feels like you're just firing a .22 caliber pistol, which makes all the difference in the world. And you are firing an effective load, but again, you're firing a projectile that's designed to fire and do damage at that type of velocity, as opposed to, for example, a hollow point. So when you start lowering velocities to reduce the recoil on a handgun, what we typically find in most cases is the hollow point they are not effective. They will not expand or mushroom because of the lower velocity. So really, in effect, the hollow point is ineffective at low velocities. It's nothing different, for example, than just shooting a standard full metal jacketed round. But again, you shoot a wad cutter out of there and it's going to do the most amount of damage at the lower velocities, which is again why I typically recommend this. So the most common producers of these low recoil loads, these 148 grain wad cutters, are Federal, Winchester, and Remington are the most common ones you're going to see out there. So again, if you're recoil sensitive on a handgun like this, try a bunch of different types of loads, find how much power you can actually manage and you can shoot effectively. And again, if you're recoil sensitive, go right to the 148 grain wad cutters. They're going to look funny because the bullet's seated within the case, but let me tell you, it's the best ammunition you can carry, and it creates a lot of versatility with this. And let me give an example. If you are recoil sensitive and for example, and you have a SIG P365, and you own it, it's a 9mm. If it's too much recoil for you, for example, then you might have to go out and buy another handgun, another P365 that shoots, for example, the 380, which is a lower recoil load. You don't have to buy another handgun with a revolver like this. You can just get different types of loads because that's the advantage you have of a revolver over a semi-automatic handgun. Now, some of the other things I really like about this, again, are the shrouded hammer. Again, this is a no snag for quick draws. It really makes it very easy to pull in and out of your pocket and be able to fire quickly. The other thing is there's no internal key lock on the handgun. So you can see that right here. This is a 44-2-1. Some of the earlier versions had the traditional key lock that you would see, for example, on a Smith & Wesson, like you can see here on my 60. That is absent on here. Again, I really like the fact that they removed the key lock feature on here. Now, what are some of the drawbacks? Some of the drawbacks are the things we just talked about earlier. If you're recoil sensitive, you're not going to like shooting stout rounds out of this. So you just have to make sure you try the rounds you need in order to get to the right ones you there. It is a typical revolver, which means they get dirty when you fire them. It only holds 5 rounds as opposed to, for example, something that holds twice that many rounds, which is the 365. But do you really need that many rounds in a close defensive situation? It also is limited in use. You know, there's not a lot of things you would use this for other than personal defense. And the other thing about revolvers are they can still be relatively expensive compared to semi-autos. Now, the good news is semi-autos they're becoming a lot more cost effective, but so are the revolvers. In this case, if you buy these right, in some cases if you buy them on sale or things like that, they can be right on par with the cost of a 365 or sometimes even less depending upon how you buy them. In fact, many people might even buy these, fire a few rounds out and sell them back to the gun store. So you can probably get good deals on them that way as well. The final thing that at least it's a con for me a little bit, is you got to make sure when you fire these and test them out that you know your holds for your fingers and where they're going. Because, for example, this is a little bit of a sharp ridge on the release button. And I've noticed, for example, when I fired the 442 and I was shooting stout rounds out, I was actually cutting into my thumb. So it was actually slicing it a little bit. So I had to change my hold a little bit on there as well. So you just got to be careful of that when you're shooting a handgun like this. So there's a number of alternatives out there on the market today. For example, the more popular ones include like the Ruger LCRs, Taurus, and even Smith & Wesson makes other types of models that all are around £1 or less. These have become very popular alternatives for people who want to concealed carry. On the semi-auto side, there's also the Glock 42s and the 43s and the Smith & Wesson Shields, etc. And then of course there's the SIG P365s, which are arguably the most popular concealed carry handguns on the market today. So as far as utility, what are these good for? As I mentioned before, this is a great summer concealed carry option. You can carry them all year, but a lot of people really like to switch over and put in the revolvers in the summer. The reason why is there's a lot of different options and things you can do with this. For example, the first thing is the grips. You can see it comes with the standard grip options here, but for example, you can move up to the Hogue grips. So in this case, the Hogue grip model that you would want for this handgun is SKU 60020. Hogue makes the best grips out there in my opinion. Now, one of the benefits of this grip is, for example, like I put on my 60, is that I can also get the further extension to have a full grip, as well as my pinky on there as well. But you'll also notice it changes the grip angle up a little bit as well. So if I overlay the pistols, you can see, for example, not only is the Hogue grip larger, but the profile, the grip angle is actually a lot less steep than a traditional revolver. So a traditional revolver getting on target, I tend to have to cock my wrist down a little bit more. With the Hogue, I actually have to do that less. It's more of a straight up type grip. So again, if you have real problems with this grip firing it, or if you don't worry about, for example, having a little bit extra grip on there, if you're carrying it in your purse or something like that, then by all means buy the Hogue grips and put them on here. It's really easy. You just unscrew them and put a new grip on. It can make all the difference in the world. However, if you're carrying this in your pocket and you're really trying to print as little as possible, you might just want to stick with the grip that you have here stock on the model as opposed to upgrading to the Hogue grip. The other thing that you can do is you can paint the front sight blade, as I indicated. Get some appliance touch-up paint, as I talked about before. It's just a great thing to help you quickly do sight acquisition. You can do the Apex tactical trigger springs, so they reduce the trigger pull. You can actually buy kits from Apex Tactical, and you can have them installed or install them yourself. It takes a little bit of gunsmithing to do that. One of the things that I would be cautious about that is, first off, if you're putting this in your pocket, you don't want it to snag and misfire, which is part of the reason why you have a heavy trigger pull. And the other part of this is you don't have to explain to the judge, if you ever get in a self-defense firing situation, that why did you lighten up the trigger on your handgun. It's much easier to say, nope, it's just a stock handgun with the stock trigger that I have in here in case you're in a defensive situation in legal matters. The other thing is, these are great with pocket holsters. So many people want to put these in their pockets, and the great thing about the pocket holster is it fits the contours of most pockets, right? So you put this in your pocket and it actually prints like a wallet. And again, because it's a revolver, it kind of slims down at the bottom, slims down at the top, and bulges a little bit in the middle. But again, these are how most people actually carry these now. And you can get things like this one from DeSantis. There's a million different types of options out there. But again, this is how most people like to carry these. You just slip it in your pocket, and then when you're ready, you just pull it out and produce the handgun. Now, as far as what this gun is great for, again, talking about earlier, two-legged predators, defense, kick guns, something to carry in your purse, something to put in your pocket, on your ankle, etc. The three greatest things about this gun are the simplicity, the reliability, and the weight, right? It's the simplicity of always knowing no matter where you grab it any time, all you need to do is pull the trigger 5 times and you get 5 bangs out of here. Because why? It's a revolver, which means it's almost 100% reliable. You don't have to worry about turning on and off safeties or whether you've racked around in or whatever. It's always ready to go. And of course, it's lightweight. These things now, with all these alloy type models you're using, even polymers, the weight is very low, but you don't want it too low so that the recoil is just too much of a pounding on you, because again, it's simple physics. So this to me is a great compromise. Now, my 60-14 is one of my favorite revolvers. This is a heavier handgun. This isn't something that I want to carry necessarily for concealed carry all the time, especially during the summer when I want to lighten things up. That's usually when I want to go to the airweight. Again, these are great for ankle carry, pocket carry, etc. The final thing I would indicate about this handgun is it does require practice when you own a handgun like this. You need to get a good understanding of how to manage and handle the trigger control. You need to understand the grip angles and where your natural point of aim is going to be. And then you also need to manage the recoil on this handgun. You need to be able to select different types of loads or select a specific load that's going to allow you to very effectively and easily fire this without having to worry about the recoil of firing a very lightweight revolver. And again, when in doubt, go with the 148 grain wad cutter loads. It's the easiest thing to fire out of these guns. So overall, it's a high quality. Smith & Wesson, they really hold their value. You've got 5 rounds, but again, the rule of 3 is this might be all you really need in most defensive situations to get you out of a bad situation. And it's a great concealed carry option, balance of weight, reliability, simplicity, as well as versatility of ammo loads. So that is a review of the Smith & Wesson Model 442. If you like this channel or like this video, please like us on YouTube, and thanks for watching.